All right, so what we're about to dive into isn't some dry, typical medical report. No, this is something way more raw, way more personal. It's called the Clark Cancer Logs, and it's a real-time record of one young man's journey, not just through a really devastating illness, but through the absolute maze of our modern healthcare system.
So, this is Clark, and when his story, his log, begins, he's just 28 years old. And as we're about to see, he's on the verge of navigating this labyrinth he could never, ever have imagined. The amazing thing is, what he documented gives us this incredibly unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look into that entire experience.
You know, the first part of Clark's journey, it really shines a light on a difficult truth, right? Sometimes the fight isn't just against the illness itself. It's the fight to even be heard, to be believed, and to just get the right diagnosis in the first place.
Just take a look at this timeline from the summer of 2023. It shows this incredibly clear and just frustrating pattern. We're talking 5 separate ER visits for severe vomiting. And did you notice the diagnosis they kept landing on? It was repeatedly blamed on his THC or cannabis use. So this became this horrible cycle of sickness and just dismissal, all while the real underlying cause went completely undiscovered.
And then, finally, after months of these delays, one single procedure just cuts through all the noise. On August 31st, a colonoscopy gives them the definitive and truly life-altering answer they had been searching for all summer.
Okay, so with a diagnosis finally in hand, the entire nature of the fight just changes completely. The search for answers, that's over. Now, it's all about understanding the enemy and laying out the plan for the massive battle that's ahead.
So what was he facing? Well, it was stage 3 rectal cancer. Now, basically what that means is the cancer had grown right through the colon wall and had spread to nearby lymph nodes. It's incredibly serious, for sure. But there was a really critical piece of good news here. The scans showed it hadn't spread to distant parts of his body, to other organs.
The treatment plan they laid out was, wow, it was an absolute marathon. We're talking an 8-month, multi-stage assault on the cancer. It starts with 33 days of radiation combined with daily chemo pills. Then, a short recovery break. After that, 6 months of really intensive direct injection chemo. And it all leads up to one single massive surgery.
And so, the first gauntlet begins. This is an 8-month test of both physical and mental endurance, documented day by day, where literally every single step forward is a monumental fight. And you know, early on, there was this huge sign of hope. By January of 2024, an MRI comes back with some incredible news. The tumor had shrunk by nearly 50%. That is a massive victory, and just a huge, much-needed morale boost for the brutal fight that was still ahead.
But that victory, as big as it was really just the end of round 1. The next phase, that intensive IV chemotherapy, was about to begin. And as we see in the logs from early 2024, it kicked off this grueling, relentless cycle.
Like, look at this entry from February 26th. You've got a day of chemotherapy, and it's immediately followed by a 2-night stay in the ER.
And then, look, it happens again on March 5th. Chemo, followed by another ER visit for these debilitating side effects. I mean, this was his reality for months. Treatment, ER, try to recover, and then repeat the whole thing over again.
So finally, after 8 long months of this brutal preparation, surgery day arrives. On July 30th, Clark goes through this complex 8-hour robotic procedure. And the initial report? It's a success. The surgeons believe they've removed all the cancerous tissue, clearing a path toward recovery.
But the recovery, well, it was anything but straightforward. Just a few days after that first big surgery, a really painful complication with his kidneys meant he had to have a second emergency operation. It's just a stark reminder, you know, that even after a major success, the path forward is always full of new challenges.
So after those surgeries, Clark spends the next several months just going through this grueling recovery process. And there's this period of, cautious optimism, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, the worst is over. But then, the story takes an absolutely devastating turn.
So what you're seeing here, this is the raw data right from the source. It's the actual PET scan report from May 2025. Now, the clinical language is pretty dense, but the conclusion, it's just devastating. It describes not only a recurrence there in the colon, but also a new suspicious spot on his liver.
And just 5 days later, the log entry translates all that clinical language into a simple, heartbreaking reality. The cancer was back.
The cancer's return, it really marked the beginning of a whole new, much more complex war. This time, the fight wasn't just against the tumor. It was against this cascade of totally life-threatening complications that followed.
And things escalated incredibly quickly. In July of 2025, a tear at his original surgery site leads to this massive infection, and he had to be emergency transferred to another hospital. In his log, Clark wrote down what the surgeon told him. It was literally a matter of hours between life and death.
And this really shows you just how complex the battle had become. I mean, think about it. The focus had to completely shift from fighting the cancer to just surviving the infection. And to do that, doctors used what's called a wound vacuum. It's this device that applies constant negative pressure to help clean and heal the surgical site.
Get this, just to fight this one infection, which itself required multiple surgeries, Clark spent 35 consecutive days in the hospital. That's over a month, just to get back to the starting line of fighting the cancer all over again. And there's just no break, no respite. As soon as he's stable from that infection crisis, the primary mission just resumes. A new, aggressive chemotherapy regimen begins, targeting the tumor that had come back.
And the cycle, it just keeps going. This photo from January 2026, it just shows the raw reality of this fight. A new year begins with another infection, another hospitalization, and a bed in a hallway. It's such a powerful image of one person's endurance inside a system that is clearly stretched to its absolute limits.
And yet, through all of this, there are these moments of support. For Clark, who you see here surrounded by friends, the fight continues. His log gives us this extraordinary, unfiltered look at what it really takes to navigate not just a disease, but our entire healthcare system. And it leaves us with a pretty critical question. What does a journey like this really reveal about the path of a patient today?